The South African Police Service has admitted that its own internal processes compromised the identities of the victims of the gang rape incident, which made headlines last year in Krugersdorp. Last month, the regulator found, that's the information regulator, it found that the SAPS violated the Protection of Personal Information Act for distributing details of the 8 women. So let's probe the broader challenges in protecting the rights of survivors and the impact that such failures have on those who've been affected. Lisa Vetten is a researcher and gender activist. She joins us now via our video link. And it's lovely to see you, Lisa. Thanks as always for making time for the AM report. You know, we often speak about secondary victimization that takes place. And outside of the breaches of the POPI Act here, the concern is that this is the kind of harm that police have opened these victims up to.
Exactly. I think we shouldn't forget that what they've also done is in violation of Section 154 of the Criminal Procedure Act, which makes it a criminal offence to actually identify a complainant in a sexual offences matter. So they could have been criminally charged for what they did too. And the reason this is both a crime and a violation of the POPI Act is precisely the extreme consequences that it can have. You know, for all our campaigns and the way we speak about rape, it still remains very stigmatized. Speaking to women who have been identified when they did not want to be, they've spoken about how they walk in public and people point them out in shopping centres and they can actually hear this kind of whisper following where they go. The way people see them at work changes as well. So there are all those consequences that occur amongst the immediate community. But I think their single biggest fear is that if their name is published, and in the case of the Krugersdorp complainant, their actual physical addresses were given out in that WhatsApp as well. They become very fearful that that particular group of men or any other, if it's been a stranger, now has your address and can come and find you. So their sense of safety is very profoundly compromised, in addition to all the stigma that is attached, that still exists, unfortunately, around being raped.
Absolutely. Do we have any idea of how prevalent this kind of issue is? I mean, in this particular case, it made headlines because the information regulator got involved. Perhaps the fact that it was on the news had an impact. But are there many of, other cases that are quite similar to this that perhaps we don't come across?
I hope not. I think criminalizing this has made people a lot more careful. It used to happen not infrequently about 15, 20 years ago, sometimes in the media. And somebody would publish enough details about a complaint that even if you didn't know their name, if you're in a small community, you could figure out who it was. But there has definitely been a decrease of that. But this is the first time I've ever seen the police being responsible for this, and that's really, really concerning. I think what is a concern is also that their apology is really not that convincing. More of their so-called apology is dedicated to explaining themselves with actually only one line reserved for the apology. And again, I don't think that takes real responsibility for the gravity of what they did in relation to this group of complainants.
Yeah, it raises questions of what justice actually looks like in this particular context. I'm sure there could be some kind of sanctioning that takes place, but as you've just outlined, in many respects, it's actually out of all of our control what happens next, because the information is out there.
It is out there, and this is where I think it requires people who do have the WhatsApp to delete it.
Yeah.
If it was on their Facebook page, they should also have deleted it, and it should never happen. And as we've said, it should never ever happen again. But I think, the strong point is the fact that the police have never actually taken any kind of consequences against the people who were responsible. And I think if they were to do that, to engage in a disciplinary process, that would go a long way towards those complainants feeling that they are taken seriously. And that because there are those kinds of consequences, it will not happen again. But a one-line apology within paragraphs of explanation doesn't really, I think, give a woman a sense that they've been taken seriously by the police.
Yeah, that apology, they speak about there being no ill intent, and I think that's going to be cold consolation for those who've been affected. It does also raise questions about in what ways this could be a teaching moment about how to handle cases around that involve rape victims, right? In many instances, police have also been criticized just for how badly they handle even just the initial reporting of a rape case.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what also makes this particular case so difficult is the fact that that after November, when those accused had charges withdrawn, there has been no movement on their case whatsoever. So they've had a situation where their details have been made public. People know who they are. They find it difficult sometimes to find work because people know who they are. They are pointed out in their community. there is no real apology to them. And their sense of safety, which has been compromised by their details being out there, still remains compromised because there have been no arrests and no movement in this case. So there's a great deal that needs to be done, I think, before the police can actually earn the trust and confidence of this group of women again, and show them that they take their matters seriously and will secure justice for them.
Yeah. I know you're no legal expert, but I wonder if you have a sense of whether these women can still take any action against police despite the apology and everything else that's happened, especially if they're able to somehow prove that this information being out there has had an adverse effect on them, even financially. You know, you've just outlined issues around job prospects.
Absolutely. And in fact, the the information regulator made it very clear when she was at the launch of their report that the women are fully entitled to make a civil claim against the police, and if they wanted to, they could even go to the regulator who could do it on their behalf. So they most certainly do have a basis for a civil claim. I mean, there's the lack of safety, the fear that is still ongoing, the impacts on work prospects, and just the psychological impact of people knowing who you are, how you're being pointed out. All of that could be taken into account. So they must definitely have a case. The fact that police have apologized clearly admits liability. So one would wonder if this case would even need to go to a court, and whether the police would have to settle because it is so open and shut. Yeah,
and they've admitted ways in which they've erred at the very least, even though that apology, as you've mentioned, could have been more sincere. I think many people will argue and agree. Lisa Vetten, thanks as always for helping us understand the extent of what's happened, and hopefully we'll be able to do right, at least for these victims. Really appreciate your time. Lisa Vetten is a researcher and a gender-based violence activist.